Go ahead.
So
That's cool.
So we're going to tie a fly very similar to this. It's running, everything's running right now?
Yes, sir.
So, good morning, my name is Vern Jeremica, and I've been fly fishing since 1962. And we're going to do a really simple fly here, and I don't have a name. We could call it Secret Fly 32 or 31, whatever you want, but it's real simple. I used to fish the Kalama River for many years, back in the 80s. And that's when I started using this pattern, and it was something simple. It was easy to tie, and later on I used it for sockeye. I remember fishing a riffle called the tackle grabber just above Mahaffey's, and I was fishing the tackle grabber, and I went in with this fly, and Bill McMillan, who was a famous dry fly guy for steelhead, showed up with a camera crew, and they're filming him, and in the 7 or 8 hours, he never took a fish, and in that same time period on this fly, I took 10 steelhead on it. I was using a sinking line with a sinking tip. It's a really simple fly. I mean, we can tie really beautiful flies. People like to fish for steelhead, and they say, well, these fish should be honored with a beautiful fly, and they'll spend 7 or 8 hours tying it. It's an Atlantic salmon, or maybe 30, 45 minutes on a spay fly, and I like doing that, but this is a simple fly. Now, go a little further to another decade, and I'm fishing
Here's your thread coming out.
the Alagnac River, and I take this fly there, and this fly was taking 100 sockeye a day. I was on a guided trip. I was guiding for an outfitter, and we used this fly, and it was a phenomenal fly. And at that time, the other associated fly that people were using is a teeny nymph, basically in the same colors, not as bright. But for sockeye, one of the things you got to understand about fishing for sockeye, or in this case, these fish, when they come up into the river, coming out of the salt water, they don't feed as much, and they probably feed the least of all the salmon. But they do strike at flies, and a lot of fish, though, that are caught by flossing, and it's because of the presentation. So you're bringing the fly across a bunch of fish, and basically the fly is lodged into their mouth, and it's not really, because the line, as they open their mouth, is across their mouth when it opens. Well, they open up their gills, and the fly gets on the outside of the fish's mouth or the inside, and it's basically because it's been flossed. But then there are times where these fish will get grabby and they'll hit. And I remember fishing the Alagnac, and you'd be fishing, and you know, you were foul hooking fish or you're flossing fish, and all of a sudden a group would come through, and bam, a bunch of them would hit the fly, and then later on it wouldn't be that way. And so that's what I found out about sockeye fishing. So I usually weight these flies, just for simplicity. We're not going to weight the fly. It's a really simple fly. But a fly like this can also be used for steelhead. And I'm thinking, you know, it's a color that they like. I usually tie this fly in a hot orange. And so what we're going to be using is this material here, this chenille. And then different types of, I'm going to put a tail on it. It can either have a tail or not, and I'm going to use this, see if I can get it to, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to see it there, but this is basically crystal hair, and it's just, that and flash poo are the 3 main ingredients. As far as thread, I'm just using a basic 6/0 fluorescent thread. So first we're going to start, and I'm just going to start just about an eye width back and mount my thread on the fly, and I'm going to go back to about where the hook point is, and that's about all. The fly doesn't need to be real big, it doesn't need to be real bushy. Now normally I would have put about maybe a medium-sized lead or a lead substitute on there, maybe 10 to 16 wraps, and then anchored it with the thread, but we're just going to keep it simple today. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this crystal hair, and I'm going to pass it around, and I'm not going to take a lot. I'm just going to take maybe about 10-15 strands, and I'll let you cut some off yourself. See, this is real simple, and I'll just pass that around.
How much did you take?
I took maybe about 6 to 8 strands, that's all. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it there, and I'm going to say, as far as length of tail, I'm going to go about the size of the body, And what I do with my flies, if I'm gonna make them all the same, I'll always try and do the same amount, so then my flies look all the same. Do you think the fish care if the flies look all the same? No. It's not gonna make a difference. The only difference it makes is to you, or when you open your fly box and people look at your flies, they say, oh man, they look really good. They all look the same, you know, but does it really matter? It really doesn't matter. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna measure about the length of the body, then I'm gonna pinch it and put it where I'm gonna begin tying. Now, one thing I'm gonna do, that I do a lot of times I'm tying, I can turn it this angle so that the stub ends here, not the ends that are gonna be tied on, are pointing towards me. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna come over with the loose wrap. I missed one, I got the other one there, got two of them there. And then pull it straight where I want it, and then come forward. So that's about how I want it. And then I'm just gonna come forward loosely to the end of the tie, just before where I started the thread, and I'm gonna trim it off. And then I'm just gonna come back. And then I can even the tips up, or I can just leave it like that. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just tail. Then I'm gonna take some of the chenille, and I'm gonna take the end of the chenille and I'm gonna peel off with my fingernail, everybody. I'm gonna peel off with my fingernail a little bit of the core. I'm gonna lay it on top. Come forward. And I'm gonna stop for a second while everybody else is doing that.
How far back did you go?
I went back to where the point of the hook was.
Okay.
And it's some color, this is a sparse fly, it's not a heavily dressed fly, it's a simple fly. And you can tie it this way, or you could tie the same fly and just make it more shrimpy by just putting it on the bottom like this. You notice here,
Okay.
notice here, this is the same fly, but instead of putting it on as a wing, I use it as a throat. And you could mix and match and do it either way and it'll be just fine. So, again, this is a simple fly. Now, you could go out and fish this with a sink tip, a weighted sink tip like a type 3 to type 6, and fish steelhead water with it on a short leader, a 3-foot leader, and that's probably kind of how you'll fish it when we go to Alaska, the same way. So, next step, just edge to edge.
Oh, and then you broke the...
Coming forward. And I'm gonna go right about there, pull it tight and underneath, catch it, come around. And when I'm tying off, I'll do maybe 2 or 3 turns this way, then I'll pull it back and I'll throw in a couple tight turns against it. That's not gonna come undone, okay?
I didn't see, did you take it up to just behind the eye?
Yeah, I have about an eye's width worth left. That's about
And
it.
you said when you tie it off, you
Yeah, let me back that up and show you again what I did. Just do that again. So what I do is I've got to this point where I catch it once, maybe coming around
twice.
2 or 3 times, then I pull it back, and then I tie right against it. So what you're doing here is it's kind of hard where he's got this thing here. What you're doing is you're compressing that material. So you've got thread on one side, you got thread on the other side, and you're compressing it. And so there's less chance that it's going to pull away. I mean, these little small techniques that you use when you tie your flies are going to make them sturdier, less chance of... And the other thing, when I trim it off, you don't need to trim off that chenille so close. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just trim it right to where it's just to the edge of the material. You could cut it in really close, but you don't really need to. Now, everybody got that crystal hair. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's called flash boo. And I'm going to pick out maybe about maybe 10 strands or so, and I'm going to take out a section. I'm going to take out a section that's about twice as long, a little more than twice as long what I need. And I'll show you why here in a second, for how I'm going to tie it on. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to pinch it. In fact, you probably need even half of what I did. I'm just going to pinch it right there. Now, if I bring this thread over, you see how it's, look at the thread. Do you see how it's going towards the back of the hook? If I'm going to talk a little bit about thread management here. So now notice, now when I bring it over, the thread is wanting to go to the front of the fly. See how the thread's wanting to go to the front of the fly? See, I'm putting it down, but see the thread, I would like the thread to be near my fingers. So if I wind clockwise, if I spin this counterclockwise, now watch, I wanted to show you what happens. Now when I bring it up, look where the thread is. It's touching my fingers. Do you see the difference there? Thread management. So now when I bring it over, in fact, let me do that again. So when I bring it over, it stays close to my fingertips. Like that. And so I'm going to do 3 or 4 turns, like this. Come forward, and then I'm going to bring this back and cover it like so. Then I'm going to bring it back to just about past the body and cut it. I'm going to cut that down a little bit just to make it a little more even. And then I'm going to finish off the head. Now this fly is sturdy. The big problem is going to be, and I don't care too much about how big the head is, but I'm going to then, I could use flash boo. I could also use this use crystal hair. I'm going to finish it off with about a 5 or 6 turn whip finish. And what I like to do one, and then maybe do a 2 or 3 turn after that. And then remember, whenever you do the whip finish, pull it tight. And then when you use your scissors, I'm not normally squeezing my scissors. I have them slightly open, and I'm using them almost like a lance to cut the thread. I find that to work much, much better. So that's the basic simple fly. Let me get one more thing for it.
Right through it. Right through it. Except for the black, the gold, and silver. Those 3 colors will not go through. But all the others
Oh, I was going to ask you if you used...
Yeah, you could use, I like super glue. I'll use super glue sometimes for the head. This brand right here, Gorilla. And I found this at home. I found this at Hobby Lobby for, I think it was $3.99. And here's what I like about this one. This one has an applicator. This Gorilla has an applicator, but it also has a brush.
Oh my gosh.
And I often will cut my brushes down to 1/3 the normal size, so you can see the size. You can see the size of the brush there. I'll cut sometimes 2/3 of that off so that I'm using less of it, and it's easier to apply. So I can put a little of that on.
Yeah, because I have
if
a needle at home that sometimes I use to put on the heads because the brush is so big.
Yeah,
and then I put it
and a needle works great. A fine point needle works really, really good. But I mean, I can use that material, or what I can do is, after that dries, I can also use the UV. This is called Pro Sport Fisher UV, and this stuff is radically expensive compared to how it was when it first came out. So I can use a little drop of that on, and a lot of times I will put that on as a with a fine needle also. I think a needle is a great way to go with that.
And what's the advantage of it?
But as far as the UV, well, it's just a hard, smooth shell, and
Glossy.
it's glossy.
Thread finish soaks in. But if you want a glossy head,
This is just a really simple fly. It works. I think presentation is really important when you're fishing, whether it's for steelhead or fishing for sockeye or any fish like that, the pinks that are going to be up there in Alaska. Getting your fly in front of the fish where you've got a natural drift, getting the fly sunk down to the fish's level, all that's going to be really important. Now, have you fished before in Alaska?
No.
No? Okay.
I tried up north of Anchorage, but the moose hunters had all of the gravel bars taken up, and I just couldn't get in any place.
Hey, Sean? Sean? Yes, sir. You want to stop that for a second? We're good to go. Stop the, we're going to do one more. We're going to do a pink pattern next. I'm going to go.